The Vancouver Canucks are set to start training camp for a second time this season on Monday. Iain MacIntyre, in your mind, what's the biggest question surrounding this team heading into camp?
Well, are they going to make each other sick? I think there's a lot of questions tactically about how they're going to prepare for this play-in series against the Minnesota Wild. But for this week, the start of training camp, I think the question is, can they practice as a full team for 5 days and not make each other sick? That's going to be the question for every camp.
Well, they've got the regulars here, some extras from the Utica Comets. Do you have any idea what camp is even going to look like for Travis Green and his staff?
Well, we know that there's different quarantine requirements for different players. The players who traveled to Canada from the US and Europe, players who traveled domestically within Canada, and then the lucky few who just spent the shutdown here in Vancouver. They're not subject to a requirement for quarantine. My understanding is the Canucks arranged the travel far enough in advance that whatever quarantine was required by any of their players is going to be fulfilled by Monday, so that Travis Green and his staff will have the option to mix and match players as they choose. I don't see them practicing as one giant group of 34 players, but they can certainly get their NHL team together.
Will Travis Green have his full complement of players? What's the health of this team like?
Well, like most teams as well, they're going to be remarkably healthy. You know, they had Markstrom and Tanev were out with fairly minor injuries when the season shut down on March 12th. They're fine. Brock Besser had just returned from about a month-long absence in the final game. He is fine, has been doing a lot of skating and shooting. The only guy on the roster where there's a question about whether he'll be able to participate is Josh Leivo. Shattered his kneecap in December. They said then that if the season went long enough, they hoped he would return. Well, we're seeing the longest season in NHL history, and it still looks doubtful that Josh Leivo will be available. But Michael Furland is at camp. He's a player who was shut down after a couple of unsuccessful comebacks from a concussion he suffered near the start of the season. He feels fine and has been skating and is going to give it another try at this camp.
And you thought you were done talking about Judd Brackett. Of course, the Canucks and Brackett couldn't come to terms on a new contract. He just signed as the director of amateur scouting for the Minnesota Wild. Does this add anything to the storyline of this series?
Only if Judd Brackett spent the shutdown working on his skating is going to be in the Minnesota Wild lineup. That would add some intrigue. The draft is not going to be in the middle of the series. It is an interesting coincidence. It's great for Judd Brackett that he has landed another amateur scouting director's job so quickly. I think a lot of people thought it might be just down the road here in Seattle. It's over in Minnesota. But no, he is not going to have an impact on this series.
Finally, it's not for this series, it's for down the road, but the flat cap next season. It's going to be difficult for Benning UFAs, Markstrom, Toffoli, Tanev, RFAs, and Stetcher, and of course Jake Virtanen. How difficult will it be for him to try to re-sign the guys he wants to get done?
Well, I would say it's naive to think that the Canucks are going to be able to keep all the players that they want to keep. They were going to have a challenge keeping their team together even when they thought the cap was going to 84 to 88 million. Now we know it's flat. It's probably flat next year and maybe the year after that somewhat. So there are going to be some hard decisions made. But I've seen a lot of speculation that maybe this means they won't be able to sign both Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson. First of all, that decision's still a year away. I think that is untrue. If there are guys who are going to be squeezed, it's not going to be the two best players to come along to the franchise since the Sedins arrived, but other guys may be a victim of this cap.
That's a matter for another day, but for now, the Canucks, yes, set to start camp Monday, July the 13th.